Hello everybody and welcome to SpaceWeek Live for Sunday, September 6th, 2020. I caught myself by surprise there. I was too busy reading the chat. So, welcome back. It's been 3 weeks since the last Space Week, which the math there doesn't work out, but I apologize for that. So 2 weeks ago, I gave myself a bit of a break, a little mental health break. Last week, I wanted to do a Space Week, but let me make sure my mic is on. Yes, my mic is on. Last week, I wanted to do a Space Week, but a whole bunch of stuff got in the way. There was a Starship SN6 hop stream going on that ended up scrubbing. There was a Falcon 9 launch, and there was an Electron launch all that Sunday that interfered with my ability to do Space Week. So I apologize for that. But here we are. Now, we have a lot of ground to cover, and so I will try to get through it as succinctly as possible. As for your questions, I have two requests. Firstly, please hold your questions until the end of the announcements so that we can consolidate them in one segment of the video rather than stringing them all throughout, which tends to slow things down. And secondly, when you ask your questions, please make sure to tag my name, like @rawspace, in the comment so that I'm sure to see your question in the chat, because it becomes difficult when the chat is full of discussion for me to pick out the questions from amongst all of that. So I thank you for those things. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's recap the past couple of weeks in space, and this brings us back to August 18th. Starlink-10 launched another 58 Starlink satellites into orbit, as well as 3 SkySat Earth imaging satellites for Planet Labs. Let's go ahead and switch over to the browser view and check that out real quick. You know what? Let me give you some audio. I had monkeyed around with the configuration for this. There we go. Audio duct mic. That's what I want. I had monkeyed around with the configuration for this view because I was streaming one of the Starlink hops, and so yeah. There we go. Music. No. All right. There. Now.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff with a Falcon 9. Go Starlink.
Stage 1 portion done.
So, let's see here. So, yes, Planet Labs operates a constellation of 150 Earth observation satellites. It's the largest constellation of Earth observation satellites in the world. And thus far, they've accumulated a 7+ petabyte archive of Earth imagery that gets used for the usual sort of things: resource management, agriculture, mapping, education, disaster response, etc. It's very cool, though. Later that same day, a Japanese HTV-9 cargo craft departed the International Space Station, giving us some beautiful views of the Earth as it floated overhead. Here, let me speed these up a bit. As with all cargo craft, except for the SpaceX Dragon, HTV-9's fate was to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. So Dragon is the only cargo craft that actually comes back and lands safely. This was the very last Japanese Kuonotori H-2 transfer vehicle. Future Japanese cargo launches will use the new HTV-X that's scheduled for its first test flight in 2021. Hopefully that goes forward, because otherwise we'll have I guess a lag in between the last HTV-1 and the HTV-X. Well, HTV-2 actually, and the HTV-X. Then on August 29th, ULA attempted to launch a Delta IV Heavy rocket with the NROL-44 spy satellite for the National Reconnaissance Office, but they ran into some problems. First, there was a hold due to an unexpected temperature reading in one of the rocket's compartments. Those are ULA's words. I'm not sure what compartment they were referring to. Once that was sorted, they resumed the countdown. And as the announcer counted down to 0 and announced liftoff, or liftoff, half-heartedly, the flames billowed under the rocket. It sounded like all 3 engines ignited in sequence, and then nothing. It didn't go anywhere. An automatic hot fire abort had been triggered at T-minus 3 seconds. Let's check that out.
And stand by.
10,
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and liftoff. And stand by. We've obviously had a hot fire abort.
So, yeah, so that obviously didn't go as planned, but despite the mishap, the system behaved exactly as it should have. Something went wrong, and the rocket shut down safely. The very expensive cargo is fine, and the rocket was not lost. I'm not a rocket engineer, so I couldn't hazard a guess as to what went wrong, but ULA will figure it out and try again. Stay tuned for that new launch date. It should be noted that after this, there are only 4 more planned Delta IV Heavy launches, all spy satellites for the NRO. Its successor rocket will be the ULA Vulcan, the first launch of which is scheduled for next year, and that will deliver Astrobotic's Peregrine lunar lander to the moon. Then there was last week, and it was a busy one. So on Sunday, there was supposed to be and I mentioned this previously, on Sunday there was supposed to be a Starship SN6 150-meter hop, but it ended up scrubbing. Thanks again to Lab Padre for allowing us to use the live video. This was just one of some of the venting that happened prior to the scrub, with inset video showing the Lab Padre Predator cam, which is thermal imaging of the launch site. They did end up actually launching SN6 later in the week, and I actually didn't queue up a video of that, but search it up on Lab Padre's channel. I actually didn't do a live stream of the successful hop because I was streamed out from the week, I guess. But look it up on Lab Padre's channel. I'll link it in the chat. So it was a successful hop. It looked virtually identical to the SN5 hop a month ago, except there was no sort of blasting of material when it took off. Looked very smooth, and although when it landed, it looked like it was sort of tilted at a bit of an angle. But anywho, moving on. That same evening, after almost 11 months of delays, a SpaceX Falcon 9 finally launched the SAOCOM 1B Earth Observation Radar Imaging Satellite for Argentina's CONAE space agency.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff of Falcon's first East Coast polar launch, ULA, Argentina.
Yeah, and this was actually the first, SpaceX's first polar launch from the East Coast. Normally they would launch from Vandenberg, which in fact is where Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, which in fact is where the SAOCOM 1A satellite was launched from. But due to, I'm not sure what all considerations were were involved, but SAOCOM 1B was moved from California to Florida. I'm sorry, to Cape Canaveral, where they did their first polar launch, which is cool. Then that same night, Sunday night, it was a very busy day. Rocket Labs returned their Electron rocket to flight after the loss of the Pixar It Didn't Happen mission in July. This mission, called I Can't Believe It's Not Optical, was a resounding success. Let's check it out.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift off.
The sheep were nominal, and the payload was delivered successfully for their customer. Not only did they deliver their payload, but they also deployed their first in-house satellite, the Photon, that they adapted from their kick stage. Move on here. So Photon is a satellite developed by Rocket Lab that was based on adapted from their kick stage that they use on all of their missions. We didn't know it at the time, though. They didn't announce until that Thursday. Their founder, Peter Beck, came on a live broadcast and announced the successful deployment of their Photon satellite. I guess you could say that my hair is an homage to Peter Beck. By the way, you may notice I'm not wearing a hat today. That's partially so that I can show off my 6 months of not having a haircut before I get it cut on Tuesday. So next week I won't look like this, presumably. So Photon will act as a satellite platform with its own propulsion system on which customers can piggyback their payloads. It's a very cool idea because the propellant and the thrusters, they take up valuable space and weight, mass, in a satellite. And so by relieving the customers of the need to incorporate those elements into their satellites, the customers will be able to use that extra space and mass for actual mission hardware. Very cool idea. And then last Wednesday, Northrop Grumman did a test fire of their solid rocket booster for NASA's SLS rocket. This SRB is very similar to the ones that were used on the space shuttle. Let's go ahead and check that out.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. T plus 5 seconds. T plus 10 seconds.
And that goes on for a couple of minutes. The test fire was successful. That's a cool view. Let's scroll to the end here.
Activate head and CO2.
Activated.
Activate quench tool command forward and aft CO2.
Activated.
So the test was successful. They started a bit of a brush fire, but they're in the middle of the desert, so that's normal, and that burns itself out pretty quickly. Now this is let's see. Unlike their Omega SRB test last year, which is a similar SRB but for the Omega rocket, in which the nozzle blew apart at the end of the test, and I think I have that queued up. Yes. So, yeah. This is a replay of last year's test. It was, I think, in May of 2019, and the where the rocket nozzle exploded.
T plus 120 seconds.
So after that test, they had a press conference, and they did not do a good job of alleviating the public's concerns about the anomaly. They basically wrote it off as a complete success, which people thought was really weird. But anyway, this is not that SRB. This is a different. This is basically the shuttle SRB that they were testing this time. So hopefully it doesn't blow any nozzles during the SLS launch, or else we'll have a bad day. And then also on Wednesday, Arianespace finally managed to launch their Vega rocket with a whole bunch of 50 small spacecraft mission service proof of concept microsatellites. Including the very first satellites from the country of Slovenia, which Microsound, our channel regular, was very excited about, him being from Slovenia. Okay, here we go. I did not queue that up, but here it is. Let's go back a little bit. Doot, doot, doot. Doot, doot.
Dix, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage P80. Allumage P80, décollage. Certainement for flight.
And as always, Vega leapt right off the pad because it's a small, the Vega's basically a solid rocket booster. It's a solid propelled rocket with a high thrust to mass ratio, and it's a small rocket, so it jumps off the pad and accelerates quite quickly. Let's see. So this launch was delayed a full year. It was supposed to launch in August of 2019, but it was delayed many times due to technical issues, the coronavirus pandemic in March, very uncooperative South American weather, and even a typhoon that was threatening a telemetry station in South Korea. In the end, though, the mission was a success, and they also, this was the first Vega launch since the loss of a Vega mission. Was it early this year or late last year? I forget which. In any case, they had the loss of a mission at the second stage failed to fire, and it just sort of arced into the ocean, which I believe it was last year, which was actually the most expensive space insurance claim thus far in history. I think it was like $600 million equivalent, something like that. But this one was a success, so good on them. And then last Thursday, SpaceX launched Starlink-11 with 60 more Starlink satellites. This one was actually a pure Starlink launch, unlike the last few launches, which have been rideshare. Like there have been 2 or 3 rideshare satellites that tagged along. This one was a pure Starlink launch. Let's check it out.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
So that brings SpaceX's Starlink total to almost 700 satellites, which is crazy. It is far and away the largest satellite constellation ever. And yeah, so there we go. Now all we have to do is wait for the email and sign up for Starlink service. Maybe. Anyway, we'll see. But finally, last night, there we go, look at that. Last night, the Moon and Mars were in conjunction in the sky, meaning they were located close to each other from our perspective. You see here the Moon. This is my photo. Took me a couple tries because first I went out there, I took a bunch of photos, came back in, and then I realized, why is the Moon so grainy? It turns out that I had been on a high ISO level from some previous shooting, and I forgot to set my ISO to a lower number. So I went back out there, reshot, and captured this image of the Moon with little Mars up there, which we see very fuzzy and enhanced in the upper right here. You can see some great terrain on the Moon. Now this was with a 600mm Tamron zoom lens on my Nikon DSLR. Nothing terribly stellar, but and I don't have a telescope. One day I will get a telescope, and I'll be able to get closer views of the Moon for you. But this is what we've got for now. Now, looking ahead to this week, let me go ahead and no. You know what? Let me link it here, and I'll just copy the link. Magic Moon likes the Moon. That's cool. All right. There we go. All right. It's going to be a quiet week. But on Monday, let's see. Oh, it's actually, I haven't put it on the calendar yet, but on Monday, September 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT, China will launch a Long March 4B rocket with the Gaofen 1102 satellite. As with most Chinese launches, there will not be live coverage. I don't believe there will be live coverage. And I don't plan to provide live coverage because I don't think there will be any. Then on Thursday, September 10th at 10 p.m. Eastern, or starting at 10 p.m. Eastern, 2 a.m. GMT, Astrospace will make another attempt to launch their Astra 3.1 rocket. Hopefully no boats or weather get in the way this time. They've had some rough seas trying to get their Astra rocket up in the air, but hopefully they get it done this time. All right. So that is it for launches this week. There's only the one, well, those two launches. I guess the calendar is making up for last week, which was sort of a madhouse. On a personal note, ASUS has shipped me a replacement GeForce 2080 Ti video card since mine had developed a glitch, and for the past few weeks I've been using an old, like a 5-year-old video card in my new computer, while the old card was shipped off for RMA. But they did some diagnostics, discovered an error in the card, and they shipped me a brand new one. So hopefully I'll be able to resume my video rendering and game playing without crashing and lag, etc. Now for your questions. Go ahead and fire away. Please make sure to tag my name in the chat so I see the question. And in the meantime, I will scroll up and see if there were any that I missed. Looking, of course, for those name tags. Okay. So earlier, Maria Kutujan said, Mission Maven was launched to assist in the transmission of data from the rover Perseverance to Earth. That transmission will be silent or the communication will not be interrupted. Maven. I am not familiar with that. I would have to look it up, so I couldn't really speak to that question. Mars Express. What is Mars Express? Oh, shoot. Mars Express. Now, if I knew this was going to be on the test, I would have studied for it. I've kind of lost track of all the... there's been a lot of Mars missions in the past 20 years. And off the top of my head, I do apologize, but I am not an encyclopedia. I'm an encyclopedia of some things, but I do not recall which mission the Mars Express was. So I think it was one of the European ones, which is probably why it's not sort of at the top of the heap in my mind. But I could Google it for you, but that would be silly because you can Google it too. So sorry for that. F in the chat. Don't put F in the chat. Scrolling. Okay. Microsound asks, are the new Starlink satellites now covered in black, as Elon said? I'm not sure what all reflection mitigation... Here, let me switch to the big cam. What all reflection mitigation... Oh, hey, look at this. It's Merry Christmas from Starman. This shirt's showing signs of... Well, it's not holding up too well. The sort of rubberish ink on the shirt is disintegrating, so it's not going to last too much longer. And then it'll just be a black shirt with weird little colored spots on it. But in the meantime, it looks like Starman being pulled by reindeer. But back to Microsound's question, the Starlink satellites. I'm not sure what reflection mitigation steps SpaceX has taken. I think they're fairly limited. You know, I don't think that Starlink satellites are particularly more reflective than any other satellites. It's just that there's so many of them. And then when they launch, they are in a train that looks very striking if you've ever seen it. Which, you know, they do spread themselves out over time, so they're not, and plus they also raise themselves in altitude, so they're not as visible once they reach their operational altitude and their operational distance from each other. You know, but as far as covering them in black, you know, the tricky part there is that black absorbs heat, and heat mitigation is one of the big challenges in space, both for manned spacecraft and unmanned spacecraft satellites. Because it's easy enough to absorb radiation, but dissipating it is difficult. And so there's sort of a balance. I mean, like, for example, if you had a perfectly reflective satellite, then it wouldn't absorb much heat, but at the same time, it would also shine like a beacon whenever the sunlight bounced off of it. So, yeah, it's a tough juggling act. Thomas T asks, will SpaceX really send up to 60,000 Starlink satellites into orbit? I guess we shall see. They've got 700 so far, and you know, I don't know if they're going to have tens of thousands, but it is possible. I guess, again, we will have to wait and see. As with anything, you know, especially in Musk land, I mean, you've just got to wait. And what is going on with the video behind me? It's kind of laggy. Okay, anyway. Earth's scrolling smoothly, though, now. All right, so who allows this, and what if another provider will do this too? So Starlink is not the only broadband, low-latency broadband internet mega constellation. There's also the OneWeb, which I'm not sure what the status of that was, because I thought OneWeb was going bankrupt. Because OneWeb is a satellite company, SpaceX is a rocket company, and a very successful one. One of the premier launch providers in the world, and so they have a lot of capital, you know, a lot of income coming in, whereas OneWeb, I'm not sure exactly what their business model is. So I'm not sure if OneWeb is still in the works, but they have done at least a couple of launches with the anticipation of having I think, a couple hundred satellites in orbit. But, okay, Gerard says the dark paint test on the Starlink satellites was a fail, so now they're going for the visor instead to shield the, I guess to deflect the sunlight in a different direction or something. Mark Desire, Starlink has missed all the Starlink trains. Yeah, I mean, you know, as with any specific overflight of a satellite, you need to be in a specific place at a well, not so much a specific place, but you need to look up at a specific time, and you need clear skies. And you know, I know in a lot of places in the world, including here in North Carolina, oddly enough, I mean, it's hot, but it's also very humid, and so there's very often cloud cover, even if it's, you know, 90 degrees. So, but I did manage to catch a couple of Starlink trains, and they are quite striking. But it wasn't the ones I saw were not like immediately after the launch. They were maybe a couple of weeks after the launch, and so they weren't as dramatic as they would have been. Kan man hier was gewinnen? I'm sorry. Can you win something here? No, we don't. We don't have contests on Raw Space currently. Chris V says it looks like my mic is wearing a COVID mask. I wasn't actually going to mention it, but I did replace the tap tap tap. I did replace the pop filter. I did replace the pop filter on my microphone. I used to have this large flat round one that was pretty ugly and unwieldy because its flexible arm would get in the way of things. And so I got this small form factor wraparound one that has foam and does the job a little more elegantly. I suppose I could just put like a piece of foam over it, but this seems to work well. Pop, pop, pop. I could paint like a surgical mask on it. Maria Kutujan asks, is there a choice between SNs for use? I think what you're asking is the Starship prototype test articles, like the SN5, SN6. I am still, I am not the foremost expert on the schedule for which tests are planned for which SN numbers. The folks at Lab Padre are going to know a lot more about that than I do, or, you know, NASA Spaceflight, or any of the other places that closely monitor the development of Starship. I just have too many things going on between, you know, work and being a single dad of 2 kids and so on and so forth. There's too much for me to be able to dig my fingers too deeply into all those little details. By the way, check out the moon behind me, rising in the distance behind the Earth. This is a replay of ISS HDEV, the high definition Earth viewing camera footage, but I like to play it in the background as something more interesting than my green screen, which, by the way, I would like to get rid of at some point. I'd rather just have the room behind me, because green screens are sort of a pain to deal with. But anywho, Mark Desire says, I should say esteemed moderator, Mark Desire Esquire, says, NASA will most likely simply go ahead with SLS. Many people think they shouldn't. So SLS is largely the product of Congress mandating that NASA leverage legacy programs, legacy hardware, legacy companies, legacy everything. You know, basically SLS is, the Space Launch System is a Space Shuttle external fuel tank, a glorified Space Shuttle external fuel tank with Space Shuttle solid rocket boosters and Space Shuttle main engines used in a expendable mode which the engines were designed to be eminently reusable, that has cost, well, that has taken many years of development and is many, many billions of dollars over budget. So, and that is largely the fault of Congress for being a bunch of short-sighted schmucks who are more interested in retaining jobs in their constituencies than in the efficient use of the citizens' tax dollars. So SLS is what it is. Hopefully it works. They've put so much time and money into it. Hopefully it is successful. But again, blame Congress for the nature of that program. All right. Boyke asks, what do I think is going to be the future of human spaceflight? I think it is going to be a slow, long road. Back in the 60s, we envisioned that we'd be, have bases on the moon and we'd be putting around the solar system. And obviously we're not, and we haven't. I think that human spaceflight, the problem is, well, twofold really. Space is in fact quite difficult. There are a lot of dangers in space, especially once you go outside of the protective sheath of Earth's magnetosphere, where you're exposed to cosmic rays and solar radiation in much larger quantities than you are if you're in the in low Earth orbit, as the ISS is. And so human spaceflight outside of our little nest here that we call Earth is going to be a slow road. I think it's going to, like, for example, we might establish a settlement on Mars in the next maybe 30 years, I'd guess. But anything more than that, like actual expansion of our civilization to live and work elsewhere in the solar system, on the moon, Mars, asteroids, etc., many, many decades, if not centuries, because it's... And the second problem, I said the problem was twofold. So first, space is hard and space is expensive. The second problem is political and monetary. Politicians, they don't give a crap about space. They truly do not care about science or technology beyond which they can benefit them personally or benefit their constituency, which secures their re-elections. And so long as the purse strings are held by politicians, we are not going to go very far very fast. Perhaps you can perceive that I have a particular disdain for politicians, but yes, I do. Really what many of us are hoping for is the successful commercialization of space, and torchbearers like SpaceX and even Blue Origin or whomever we're hopeful that companies like those and that deep-pocketed visionaries who can grease those skids, as it were, will sort of carry humanity forward, absent the ball and chain that is the government, basically. We shall see. It's really a shame because as a lover of science fiction and as a lover of space, people like myself, they have great hope for the future, but it just, practically speaking, it just seems like the future we hope for is so far away that there's really no hope of any of us seeing even the slightest smidgen of it in our lifetimes, which is unfortunate, but yeah. C'est la vie, as they say. Yep, so Maria Kutajan mentions that there are launches of, there's another Soyuz, is it a Soyuz launch? There's another launch of astronauts to the ISS coming up, but that is later in the month. I'll talk about that in a future episode. Niklas Yule Jacobson asks, why does it seem like the rest of September is so quiet in terms of launches? Well, because it is. Launches, oftentimes, they go in spurts, or, you know, there will be a flood of launches and then a relatively quiet period. It's possible that the launch, like a lot of the launches that have been happening in the past couple of weeks, were rescheduled many times, and a lot of them were supposed to launch months ago, but they were, you know, delayed for one reason after another, and then all of the launches ended up just happening at once. So the launches that are coming up, you know, so basically they had a backlog of launches that they had to get, that the industry had to get caught up on, and many of those have been taken care of now. You know, they still, ULA still needs to launch their Delta IV Heavy with the NRO L44, and Astra still needs to launch their 3.1 rocket, which they're going to try to do later this week, which I discussed. So basically that backlog is being taken care of, and so now we're reaching sort of a lull in the launch schedule, as there aren't as many pending launches. Mark Desire says that going to the moon is not that hard. The problem there is that there's almost no reason to go. Yeah, that's an arguable point as far as the purpose of going to the moon. I mean, the moon doesn't really have any resources that we need that we know of, but it is a great location for like a astronomy, you know, like an observation post or whatever. We could conduct scientific research, you know, I don't know, I mean, whatever. But, all right. Mark also asks, why do rocket engines make this rattling sound? By rattling sound, are you referring to the sort of popping and ripping sound of a rocket launch? That's because the thrust from the launch is literally ripping the air. I mean, the supersonic, you know, the thrust from the rocket is literally ripping the air around it, and causing it to emit, you know, lots of these shock waves. And I mean, that's why they have water suppression systems on, you know, during rocket launches. For large launches, they have these enormous water suppression systems that spray water over the whole launch site in order to, not to cool things off so much, but to dampen the sound waves from the rocket, which otherwise would physically, the sound waves themselves would physically damage the pad hardware and perhaps rip the rocket itself apart. And so the sort of ripping, rattling sound you hear during launches is the air literally getting torn to shreds by the thrust, pretty much. Giovanni Foulmouth mentions that robots aren't that advanced. That's a real shame too, because the main limiting factor in our expansion into space is us. I mean, the main limiting factor is our squishy, fragile biological bodies that are susceptible to radiation. And you know, if we could, I mean, like all the trouble that astronauts go to in order to swap out batteries on the ISS during a spacewalk. I mean, if a robot could do that, it would be so much easier. But we simply don't have robots that are that advanced and that dexterous and that autonomous. You know, with sufficient AI or for that matter, sufficient low latency in order to be able to remotely controlled in a dexterous and efficient manner. But I think that robotics will largely be the future of, will be essential to our expansion into space because, for example, the construction of large space habitats, O'Neill cylinders and things like that, is really going to require extensive use of robotics. It's not, I don't think it's terribly realistic to, to have like 1,000 astronauts up there doing construction on this megastructure or whatever. Whereas 1,000 robots, sure, why not? There's no oxygen needs, there's no pressurized atmosphere, there's no, life support, anything like that. They're just machines. Let me try that again. Arnaknud mentions helium-3 mining on the moon might be a good idea. If you've ever seen the movie Moon from, I think it was 2009, that's what they were doing, was helium-3 mining. So that's a possibility. And I think helium-3 is used in, I don't know, some nuclear reactors or something. I'm not sure. I'm not a chemist. I'm a computer guy. All right. Drilling rigs on comets. Rockin' Robbins, hello. Didn't see you there. You've probably been, you've been commenting. I just didn't. I'm blind. The moon is much more valuable than those who think we know all there is right now can imagine. All right. I actually have a house guest, and I am grossly neglecting him right now. But I wanted to bring you up to date on the space news of the last few weeks. And by the way, thank you very much, Maria Kutujan, for that 1090 Brazilian real donation. It's very appreciated. So last week I mentioned that the channel had become eligible at long last, after 2+ years, had become eligible for memberships, which is where you sign up for a monthly donation and then you get perks and stuff. What's been holding up the release of that feature, or the turning on of that feature, is that I've had a busy week and I need to make a video announcing it in order to release it, and so that's it's sort of ironic, sort of chicken or egg scenario. I need to make the video in order to enable the memberships so that I can make more videos. Anyway, that's what's been holding that up. But I do hope to release that feature for those of you who may be interested in that method of support for the channel later this week. So fingers crossed on that one. Snow Kittens mentions maybe Chang'e 5, the Chinese probe, can change some insights about the moon. I wouldn't count on it. China keeps their data very close to their chest. They, they have a very robust space program, but they're operating in a vacuum. Pardon the pun. I mean, they're operating without collaboration with any other space agencies or scientific organizations or anything like that. So if they deign to share their information with us, then that would be great, but I wouldn't really hold your breath on it. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up for this week. Thank you all so much for coming. Greatly appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this SpaceWeek Live, and keep it raw, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you once again for coming.